With the news that I don't think anybody wants to continue to talk about, but that we have to continue to talk about because, well, when I first reported it back in January at the end of the season that the Pittsburgh Steelers had some interest in moving on from George Pickens this offseason, it came with a bunch of no chance, not going to happen, no way. Okay. I sat back and said, I will listen and I will continue and I will not push, although I think I did push the narrative a little bit. And Omar Khan spoke at the league meetings. And immediately my mindset flipped. Okay, I've been hearing what I've been hearing, but Omar Khan is being very straightforward. And this is not once, but twice that the Pittsburgh Steelers have said they have no intentions of moving on from George Pickens. And then at the pre-draft press conference, at that point, my mind is already made up. George Pickens might stay here. Omar Khan says it again, that they have no intentions of trading George Pickens, that they aren't even thinking about trading George Pickens, that they want DK Metcalf and George Pickens to be the dynamic duo with, well, if you ask Shedeur Sanders. Awesome. Except for the fact that today, this afternoon, Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports came out and said that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not expected to keep George Pickens, that nobody expects around the league for the Pittsburgh Steelers to pay both George Pickens and DK Metcalf, who they handed a $150 million deal to this offseason after giving up a second-round pick, and that the consensus, the sentiment around the league is that the Steelers are going to move on from their 24-year-old receiver, that they're going to get something for him, and that maybe that something is a second-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's less. We'll find out. But he also said this, that, quote, Pickens is one intriguing trade name to watch, Pittsburgh has taken and made calls on the talented wide receiver who's now extension eligible, After paying Metcalf, league sources are skeptical the Steelers will pay two wide receivers. I don't care what the skepticism is around the league. I've heard a lot of the same skepticism. I've heard a lot of the Steelers are moving on from George Pickens. They're most likely going to trade him. But I've heard Omar Khan say it twice now that they want to keep him. And they want to figure out a way to keep him. And I looked at it and said, I think they do want to keep him. But they understand that eventually things could change and that George Pickens having an issue with them not extending him is going to be what transpires. That's how we get from point A to point B of Steelers not wanting to trade him, but having to trade him. Unless the Steelers are already interested in it and they're already making calls. And Omar Khan is saying this just to save face because truthfully, we could sit here and say, listen, Omar Khan, listen, Omar Khan, listen, Omar Khan. But in the same sentence, most people would say, well, how do you believe the Steelers lie to people all the time? They're just constantly lying, smoke screens. If you're following that logic, the logic that you can't believe everything that you're told, and that teams obviously have to say things in front of the media that they would not say because league sources and teams, representatives, head coaches and general managers tend to be on different wavelengths. They tend to, sources are giving out information. They're excited to give out information. They're giving out certain information to skew a narrative in one way or another. GMs and head coaches are giving information to the media to skew information one way or another. In this one, maybe it's to save face with George Pickens in case a trade does not happen. Because maybe they don't get a trade on draft night. Maybe they don't even come close to a trade on draft night. And they need to make sure that Saturday morning or Saturday night, whenever, Sunday morning, George Pickens and the Pittsburgh Steelers are still cool. Things are chilling. Everybody's in a good spot. No worries. George wasn't getting traded. No chance. No chance. We didn't want anything to do with the George Pickens trade. That was all rumors. We've shut them down twice. Maybe that's what it is. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying maybe. I'm just tossing out the idea because you have to toss out the idea. If you're talking and you're listening, well, maybe that idea makes some sense. But the question is, what would get them to that next level? What would they trade for George Pickens to actually make this happen Thursday night? Because that's when it would happen, most likely Thursday into Friday. No chance they're going past the second round. I'll start there. And if they do go past the second round, if they end up with a third-round pick for George Pickens, Omar Khan has lost. Steelers have lost that trade. They are losers in that trade scenario because by no means should the Pittsburgh Steelers be getting anything less than a second-round pick. I think they could get a second-rounder. I think it's very interesting to have conversations like, if the Bears want to trade out of the second round and somehow Emeka Egbuka is still sitting there at pick 10 in the second round, if the New York Giants are moving up and the team that they traded with, whoever that is, wants to trade back again, and Emeka Egbuka is right there, or Matthew Golden, who I don't think is going to be there, is right there, or Jaden Higgins is right there, or Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, right there. And the Steelers are saying, oh, it's time to make a move for the future. I could see it happening. I could also say that coming into today, I did not see that happening. I saw it on the table, but I didn't see the likelihood of it. The Steelers actively making calls, which Schultz walked this back a little bit and said, he's not actually on the trade block. We know he's not on the trade block, but that doesn't mean teams aren't calling. Everybody calls. There are constant conversations. It's like the Trevor Lawrence thing. I doubt that the Steelers called and said, hey, what do you want for Trevor Lawrence? But I don't doubt that somebody somewhere had a conversation and casually brought up, what would you give for Trevor Lawrence in a situation where if they said, oh, a fourth round pick, the Steelers wouldn't actually make a phone call. If it's the same situation here, all it takes is that one right offer to come in for the Steelers to say, all right, we're good. Let's make a move. Let's pull the trigger. George is gone. Do I think it's the right move? No, I don't. I truthfully don't. I think if you could keep George Pickens, it makes a lot of sense. I think if you could replace George Pickens with an Emeka Egbuka, with a Jaden Higgins, maybe, just maybe, I'd be on board with the Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, but I don't think I would be. But if you could find another wide receiver, you could convince me that it's okay. You could convince me that that move makes sense long-term for the Pittsburgh Steelers, even if it's setting them back. And to be honest with you, I'm okay with making the move as long as you have a replacement and not worrying about this season. I don't think that George Pickens is the difference maker between a Super Bowl or not when Mason Rudolph is your quarterback. I just don't. But what I do think is if it's DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin and somehow you end up with Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers, okay, well, now you just signed a quarterback, went and got a quarterback after you messed up the wide receiver thing again. Doesn't make any sense. I'm not on board with trading George Pickens unless the situation is near perfect. I think near perfect could happen. I do think it's on the table. It's possible. I wouldn't do it otherwise. The Steelers seem to have some interest. Again, I haven't explored that sense. It was constantly for months, or I guess 2-3 months. Yeah, they're open to it. They're definitely open to it. They're ready to, if the right situation presents itself, move on. I mean, I heard that back in January, 2 days after the season ended. That's when I heard it. Seems like we're here and nothing's changed except for the fact that the Steelers would love for this to happen, or would love for them to keep George, but they're not certain that it's going to happen, and they have to protect themselves. That's how I'm looking at it. They have to protect themselves where they're at right now.